Hello, how we doing?
We appreciate you stopping in. We're going to talk about generosity and righteousness and
Love?
love, hate, maybe.
Maybe. Yeah. We're kind of maybe a little scattered. We know where we want to go, but we don't know how to get there. Is that
Well, that's
fair
all
to
of our
say?
videos.
Yeah, that's
So,
all of our videos.
this is just a subject that's been coming up a lot in our daily lives, and so the whole reason for our videos, we're not putting on a performance. Obviously, we put some work into, not a lot, but we put what we could into a background, into a setting.
In the loft of the barn with chickens in the
You
background.
know, a loft of the barn with the chickens in the background. We're not a huge production. We're not trying to impress anybody with our performance here. But what we do is we have conversations, usually drinking brandy and smoking cigars, of things that we've been texting back and forth or calling each other, and we want to bring that to people because we think there's either we're so far off we need somebody to be like, well, rein that in, guys, or
Yeah.
it's information that might be useful to people. And so that's why we do this. We are using our Bibles. We are using apocryphal texts sometimes. But yeah, this is just a subject that's been coming up a lot lately in our personal lives and also our conversations online that we see other people having, is just what is love, what is hate, and what are we supposed to be doing as Christians?
Yep.
That's how we got to where we're at. So,
I kind of wanted to start in Matthew, and I'm just going to, Matthew chapter 25, and Jesus is talking here. He's going through quite a long discourse and talking, and I'm going to roll that passage for you on the screen, and you can listen to it being read, and then we will come back and talk about it.
talk about it. And for those of you on live stream, you won't get that luxury unless you go ahead and actually go into the link in the bio. You can find our Rumble or our YouTube, and that will be there in the future. But unfortunately, for now, you have to suffer.
But when the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the holy angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. Before him all the nations will be gathered, and he will separate them one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on the left. Then the king will tell those on his right hand, "Come, blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." Then the righteous will answer him, saying, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you a drink? When did we see you as a stranger and take you in, or naked and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and come to you?" The king will answer them, "Most certainly I tell you, because you did it to one of the least of these my brothers, you did it to me." Then he will say also to those on the left hand, "Depart from me, you cursed, into the eternal fire which is prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you didn't give me food to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you didn't take me in, naked, and you didn't clothe me, sick and in prison, and you didn't visit me." Then they will also answer, saying, "Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty, or a stranger or naked or sick, or in prison, and didn't help you?" Then he will answer them, saying, "Most certainly I tell you, because you didn't do it to one of the least of these, you didn't do it to me." These will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life.
And so the part that, of course, and we'll go back to the story here, but that sticks out to me, you cursed, "Depart from me into everlasting fire,
Yep.
because I was hungry and thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you did not take me in."
Yeah, but I think that's our problem. The reason we're coming into this is we see churches talking about being loving and being kind and being generous.
They talk about it.
They talk about it, but they don't put it into action. If somebody is in need, They say, well, don't bother me with that. That's for somebody else.
And sometimes they'll take care of a need. They'll write a check or something to take care of. There's this program going on where they're feeding the hungry over at the soup kitchen. Let's send them $20.
Yeah, and again, if you think about it, as the way you treat others is the way God's going to treat you in the end. For somebody to say, hey, I need a place to stay, and you say, well, that's just no, that's not for me to do.
Right, and we don't do that kind of thing.
And if you stand before God and you say, hey, God, I screwed up and I need your forgiveness, and he says, no, that's not for me to do.
Right.
You all of a sudden realize that if it's truly a tit for tat, what you do to others, I will do to you. If nothing else, just out of the fear of the Lord, which is the beginning of wisdom, you're going to start helping people. Be like, if that was me and I was God, how would I hope that God responds to me?
Yeah.
That's how I'm going to respond to you.
Yep. What you just said reminded me. Years ago, we had some conferences Mom and I were going to, and I think it was down in Georgia. It was a long distance drive, and we thought, let's just hook up with a family that lives there, and stay the weekend of the week or whatever with them. It seems kind of cold or impersonal just to go get a motel room. So we contacted the pastor or somebody in the church that the conference was being held at, one of those big mega churches, and said, hey, we're going to be down there. We'd love to meet you and love to meet some of the people in your congregation. Do you have somebody in your congregation that would take us in? We'd like to stay there. I don't remember how we phrased it.
To be housed for the weekend.
Yeah. He wrote back and said, we don't do that here.
At least he was honest.
Yeah, he was honest, and I was just speechless. I didn't even know how to respond. I really was. I don't know how many times we've had things in our community and whatever, and we've taken people into our home. I just thought that's what people did.
Yeah.
And that's how you get to know people and spend time with people. So, we spent $120 a night on a motel room instead.
Yeah, and it doesn't always turn out good.
No.
Sometimes you get burnt. Sometimes you get burnt bad.
But we've met some really cool people. We have done that, and successfully, where a pastor or somebody in the congregation or somebody in the group would say, "Sure, come to our place," or we've got this family, and we've stayed with some cool people, and it's just fun to get to know people.
Well, that was one of the things that I did when I went to Ireland. Was I actually got to stay with a family in Ireland for 2 or 3 nights. It wasn't a long time, but I stayed with them. I ate their food.
Right.
I went out with their kids and did the things that they do, and I got to know the culture better than if we were to just stay at a house.
Right.
Or at
a motel.
A motel.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Plenty of that as well. But yeah, so it's something that we are losing in our culture.
That hospitality, that
generosity.
And it's interesting, the word in Hebrew, which the Hebrew, as we're reading Old Testament, as we're reading from later here, we're going to go through Jasher a little bit. Hebrew, as in the book of Matthew, because Matthew was a Jew and he's writing in Hebrew. That word righteousness that's being used often simply means generosity. It means in Hebrew to make somebody else right.
Yeah.
To vindicate their issue, whether they're hungry or they're naked or they're homeless or whatever the situation is, we in righteousness make them whole.
So before we go into Jasher here, there's some groups of people out there that it's not coming straight out of Scripture. Only a fool would quote it.
I don't know what to do about that. I could be reading from Shakespeare; it wouldn't matter.
Well,
if there's a story, it's worth having. But this one just happens to be factual.
Well, yeah. Well, George MacDonald would say, truth is truth, whether from the mouth of Christ or the mouth of Balaam.
Right. Good point.
So there's that. But do we have any reason to reference Jasher? How do we find Jasher? Is there any reference in the Bible of the book of Jasher?
Well, I didn't make note of it, but there was a number of places where Jasher is quoted, both Old Testament and New, the book of Jasher. So the Jews of, say, Jesus' time, for instance, would have known Jasher as well as they knew Genesis.
Yeah.
It was a normal book in their collection of books that they would have read from.
And they would have considered it a historical document.
Historical document. It's not, God breathed scripture, if you're into those kind of terminologies that, I understand it's coming from the book of Timothy, but we tend to, I'm not making less of that, but I'm just saying we tend to say, again, like you said, if it's not absolutely coming out of this black-bound book, it's not, we don't want to hear it.
Yep.
But you'll read, John Calvin or,
right, all these other pastors,
Arthur Pink or whatever you want. And it's like, no, this is a historical. A lot of people, pastors, constantly quote from Josephus. Mm-hmm. Josephus is a historian that lived around Jesus' time, and he gives a very detailed account of Jesus and the crucifixion and all of the things around the disciples and all that. He was very aware of all the things that were going on. So they quote Josephus all the time. But you bring up Jasher or Jubilees or any of the apocryphal books, well...
Now, am I mistaken to believe that even Jesus quoted the book of Jasher?
I don't think so, but Jesus was a master at words. Go figure.
Right. He was the Word. Different video. Go back and look at our past video on the Word.
Yeah. He was very masterful, and so there's a lot of what they call allusions, where he speaks in words that if you were a well-versed Hebrew like a Pharisee, mm-hmm. and had a lot of scripture memorized like a Pharisee, you would have known exactly what he was talking about. So when he uses certain string of words, it's not necessarily a quote, but it's enough to make him go, oh, I know what he's talking about. And this is one of those cases where what we're pulling from here in Jasher fits exactly what Jesus is talking about. And a Pharisee sitting there would have said, oh, that comes from that story.
So I guess it's mentioned in Joshua 10:13, 2 Samuel 1:18, and 2 Timothy 3:8. So none of those would have been the words of Jesus himself.
But Old Testament, very old. Joshua is very, very old.
Mm-hmm.
And
which means this isn't just some crazy person, at year one that wrote this about, what was written in Genesis. This would have been written close to the time of Genesis. It would have been written before Joshua.
Right.
Because Joshua quoted it.
Right.
So, or referenced it at least.
Uh-huh. There's dispute whether those original texts still exist and so on, and this book has been rewritten, and I think you can make that argument.
This book was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Book of Jasher, as well as the Book of Jubilees, and I believe a few others from the Apocrypha. I think actually everything that's in that book was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. We should get a Dead Sea Scroll book. I think that would be fun. But so this has we have as much evidence for this as this for accuracy based on old manuscripts.
Yep.
But this is going off on a wild tangent on why the Book of Jasher, which isn't the whole point of this.
Yeah, and I'm assuming our audience isn't questioning that. If they are, they may not be our audience. But
that's true.
There may be some that never heard of it and think, oh, by the way, these books, well, some of these books, I'm pointing to the Apocrypha that I've got in front of me, that includes things like Jasher and Jubilees. And I don't have the answer to this right now, but some of these books were actually included in the leather-bound book.
Correct.
As apocryphal until about 150 years ago.
Yeah.
Then there was this dispute
I believe they're still in Catholic churches today.
Yeah, there's this dispute between the Protestants and the Catholics, and they got mad at each other, and the Protestants said, fine, and they pulled it out. Anyway, so we don't see it anymore in our generation. But it's been there for almost 2,000 years after Jesus.
Yeah, our founders would have been raised with...
King James would have executed anybody who would have copied the King James book without including the Apocrypha.
That's a good point.
Executed.
Yep.
He thought it was important.
That's true. So anyway, that was a rabbit trail. Let's rein it back into... That was my fault. But let's rein it back into... Oh, yeah.
Yes, I really do need all those chickens.
Perfect for the background noise.
You hear all that? So, Jasher, I don't know how much of it I want to read. There's bits and pieces, but I really just kind of want to summarize more than anything. Mm-hmm. But in the book of Jasher, around chapter 17, 18, 19, probably 18, 19, you get this whole story, and we have a similar story in the Bible. Same people, same time, same issue. When the angels come to Abraham, and we have this really interesting, phenomenal story where Abraham negotiates with God. Because God says he's going down to destroy the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. There's 5 cities. He's going down to destroy them because of their wickedness. And Abraham begins this, well, what if there's 50 people there? What if there's 20 people there? What if, I probably got the numbers wrong, but he's negotiating with God. Will you really destroy the whole city? And God's like, no, I won't destroy it if I find 50 people there that are righteous. That are righteous. Remember what righteous means? Yeah, I won't destroy the city if I find 50 people who are
willing to make others right,
generous and willing to make other people right. I won't destroy the city even if I find 10, and I should have looked this up, the actual numbers. Do you want to go back to that?
Sure. He's, you could say, arguing with God, which is a whole problem that we in the church nowadays refuse to consider. Like, well, if God said it, that's the way it needs to be because he's all-knowing, and you're not. You're not wrong.
Abraham had a certain amount of chutzpah, did he?
Yeah. But that's almost every man mentioned in the Old Testament.
A lot of them.
Argued back and forth.
What we call the patriarchs, yep.
Yeah. They either argued or they questioned.
Interceded for the people, like David often did, before God, and Moses. God and Moses went round and round a number of times.
Even Cain.
Yeah. And God relented.
Yeah, he granted his request.
Yep.
So that's the importance of a personal conversation, communication. And it comes with growth. You don't start off as a new Christian arguing with God. That's not what you do.
Right.
Just like if Elena, my she's 6 now, my 6-year-old was to start to argue with me, she's going to get a spanked butt and she's going to do what she says.
Right.
Connor has a little bit more leeway to argue with
me.
me.
Might negotiate something.
And at this point in our life, I have a lot of leeway to argue with you because I'm more grown, our relationship is stronger. Right. I know what you expect, and we can have back and forth.
And it's not a disrespectful, I don't know if in our culture whether argue is the right word. I would use maybe negotiate or maybe not. I don't even like negotiate because that sounds more like a business dealing, but it is arguing is the right word, but culturally it comes off wrong. It's not an angry thing. A pleading?
Yeah.
Or
petition?
Yeah. So God comes to Abraham with a couple of angels, and he tells them that he's about to go down and destroy Sodom, the 5 cities of Sodom. The men rose from there and looked towards Sodom, and Abraham went with them. Talk about the men being the angels. And we find later that one of the angels was God himself. And Abraham went with them to send them on the way. And the Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? Since Abraham shall surely become great and a mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. For I've known him, in order that he may command his children and his household after him, that they may keep the way of the Lord, and do righteousness and justice. It's interesting how the words go together. That the Lord may bring to Abraham what he has spoken to him. And the Lord said, and this is where we really begin, because of the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah and the 5 great cities, because their sin is so very grave, I will go down now and see whether they have done altogether according to the outcry against it that has come to me, and if not, I will know. So the men turned away from there and went towards Sodom, but Abraham still stood before the Lord. It's almost like he's standing in front of him. You're not going down there until we're done.
Yep.
And Abraham came near and said, would you also destroy the righteous, the generous, with the wicked? Suppose there were 50 righteous within the city. Would you also destroy the place and not spare it for the 50 righteous that are in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing. That's Abraham talking about God, talking to God.
How dare you?
How dare you do such a thing, to slay the righteous with the wicked, so that the righteous should be as the wicked. Far be it from you. Shall not the judge of the earth do what's right?
Put a bookmark in there. So that means that Abraham knew the importance of generosity.
Yes.
As if that's almost our main call.
Yes. I mean, God said that right from the beginning, but I'm raising up Abraham to be like a leader of a great nation because he understands righteousness and justice.
Yeah.
I can't withhold this from him.
So even though those in Sodom and Gomorrah don't actually have a personal relationship with God, Abraham's saying, even though they don't know who you are, if they're generous, how dare you?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's strong words.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Anyway.
Yep.
Continue.
So the Lord said, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare all of the place for their sake. Then Abraham answered and said, indeed now, I am but dust and ashes. He's recognizing his place before God.
It's humility. I'm nothing. Yep.
And I've taken it upon myself to speak to Yahweh, to God. Suppose there are 5 less than 50. Will you destroy the city for the lack of 5? So God said, if I find there 45, I will not destroy it. And Abraham spoke yet again and said, suppose there should be 40 found there. And God said, I will not do it for the sake of 40. Then he said, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak. Suppose there should be 30 found there.
So right there, he's admitting, I know I'm pushing my limits here.
And I know there may not be 45 or 40. Let's go for 30.
Yep.
Because I know that city, and it ain't good. And he said, I will not do it if I find 30 there. And he said, indeed, now I have taken it upon myself to speak to the Lord. Suppose 20 should be found. So he said, I will not destroy it for the sake of 20. Then he said, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak but just once more. Suppose 10 should be found there. And Yahweh said, I will not destroy it for the sake of 10. So the Lord went on his way as soon as he had finished speaking with Abraham, and Abraham returned to his place. Then we go into the story, and most of you know, but I can summarize it. The angels go to Sodom and Gomorrah, and the men of the city take hold of the angels and want to have sex with them. And we get this whole picture of the horrible sexual immorality that's going on there. Lot, the man named Lot, who is actually Abraham's nephew,
Okay.
is there within the city, and he takes the men in righteousness. Doesn't know that they're angels, but he takes them in, which we will find later is against the law, and Lot would have been executed.
Killed. Yep.
For taking them in. And he takes those angels in, and the men begin to bang on the door and try to break into Lot's house in order to have sex with these men that have come into the city. Probably, good looking. They're angels. They are literally breaking down the door. So the angels open the door and blind all the men of the city. And it says in the Bible that they wearied themselves trying to find the door. They literally didn't stop.
Yeah.
They were blinded by God and didn't stop. Until they were tired out from just trying to find the door.
They were still,
These are some pretty perverted guys. So that's the picture that we get out of the Bible, and we always talk about Sodom and Gomorrah. We actually get the word sodomy from that story, because in the Bible, that homosexuality is what it's talking about. And God came down there to curse the city. In the book of Jasher,
it paints the same picture, but slightly more detail.
Yeah. Anytime you have, even in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you have 4 people telling the same story in a little bit different way, because they're seeing it with different eyes. And the book of Jasher goes into more detail because it breaks down a lot of what's going on in the city even before the angels ever come. So we get to know more of the sexual immorality and stuff.
Also, they would have used a lot of, I think the word is remez, where they would have been referencing back. Jesus did this all the time with a few words from Old Testament, from old historical stories, assuming that when he references a piece, you'll remember the whole thing.
Yes.
So if Matthew is talking about Sodom and Gomorrah and the sexual immorality, he might be focusing in on that because of the group he's with, but he would be assuming they would remember all the rest of it.
They know the story. Yep. That's exactly right.
So that's where it's important to come back to the book of Jasher, where they learned about Sodom and Gomorrah, which I believe Genesis probably would have possibly been referencing this.
Yeah, I don't know which one came first.
Yeah.
Okay, so in the book of Jasher, it spends a couple of chapters, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it spends a couple chapters telling the story, like you said, from a different perspective. And we know that there was incredible sexual immorality there. They literally would go 4 times a year to this valley that was all, there was streams and rivers and water and trees, and they would have these big, huge parties where everybody would trade wives, and they'd bring their children with them. And the children, I mean, this whole thing is this torrid, sexual, immoral, orgy, whatever. And it was a thing that all these 5 cities got together and did 4 times a year. So it was just anything goes.
Yeah.
Not all that different from America in a lot of cases.
Just more extreme.
More extreme. But there were laws passed in these 5 cities that if and keep in mind, these cities are big and people are walking, they're not driving. So when you get to a city, you're a traveler and you're doing business with these cities, and you're selling furs or gold or jewelry or whatever you've got. You come into the city, you do some business, and it gets to be nighttime. You need a place to stay.
Yeah.
It was against the law to take in a stranger that spent the night. They literally made it illegal. We've got our people, this is our town, and if you're doing business here, great, but get your hell out of town.
Yeah.
You don't belong here.
Generosity was made illegal.
It was illegal to be generous. It was illegal to feed the poor. It was illegal to take somebody in. If they were cold at night, let them freeze. And it literally, for you to go out and give bread to somebody who was hungry, you could be executed for it.
Yeah.
And we know from the book of Jasher that Lot's daughter, in one case, a man came into the city and he was hungry, and the night came and he had no clothes, and one of his daughters went out into the city street and would feed him. And the city thought, I mean, this happened over a period of time, and I'm not quite sure exactly how that happened, but period of time, and they realized that this foreigner, this stranger, was within their city, but he wasn't starving to death. And they wondered why. So they sent spies out to find out why, and they found out that Lot's daughter was sneaking out and giving him food. They dragged her into the city street and burned her to death. So she literally was burned at the stake, or burned in the streets.
Yep.
For feeding the hungry. That's all she did. There wasn't anything else going on. We know that there's another story, and there's and the reason I'm not reading all this, there's story after story after story. There's another story where a man actually did take somebody that was a well-known man in the city. He took somebody in his home, but basically he took them in to abuse them.
Yeah.
He took them into his home and helped him take care of his donkey and all his merchandise and all of this thing, because the guy was a traveling salesman.
And wouldn't give any of it back.
And they wouldn't give any of it back, and then they actually charged him for everything, and ultimately took him before the king. The guy took it before the judge, and the judge rewarded the townsman for abusing the stranger.
Yep.
And then the stranger was ultimately put to death. And the story after story of people who were hungry, people who were naked, people who lacked shelter. And then that word naked, by the way, doesn't necessarily mean they're missing clothing, although sometimes that's the case, or they're cold at night and they didn't come prepared with clothing. But naked means homeless. Naked means they don't have a shelter over their head. They don't have a place to stay. That's more the meaning of that. So when I was naked, you didn't clothe me, that terminology that Jesus uses there. So in the city of Sodom and Gomorrah, the 5 cities there were times where people came and they didn't have a place to stay. They didn't have shelter. They didn't have food. They were sick, whatever the case may be. And the people there not only refused to help, but they actually was against the law to help. In the case of Lot's wife or daughter we hear about, they actually put her to death for helping. Later we find these men then in the Bible. We've got the story of the men, the angels we just talked about, came there. Lot took them in, and the people of the city literally were trying to break into his house to have sex with these men. That's how perverted these cities are.
And this brings to mind something. When we hear this as as Christians and teachings, and these are just horrible, evil people because look what they were doing that was just so wrong.
Yeah, I don't even know any place like it's that bad.
Mm-hmm. But this is how they were raised. So the first generation probably wasn't that bad.
Right.
They probably just hey, we're gonna get together and have a party every 4 times a year just because we want to have a good community.
We're gonna go to Vegas.
Mm-hmm. And then a generation down the road, it was like, hey, we're already having these parties. It's fun. It'd be more fun. It's like, let's just swap wives for a weekend.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then, a generation later, it was, we're all going to swap wives. And then a generation later is you have to swap your wife.
Right. Let's bring your children.
And then a generation later is like, hey, we've all had each other's wives. What about your kids? You got a daughter that's, she's just about of age.
Mm-hmm.
And, she's already been doing this with her boyfriend anyway. So let's, bring her into this party. And then all of a sudden it's all of them. And so after a dozen generations, the kids are raised thinking this is normal.
What were we talking about just recently, where what is accepted by one generation,
what is tolerated by one generation will be embraced by the next.
Mm-hmm. And required by the next.
Yep. Which is what we're seeing nowadays. So when you were a kid, the gay thing was
people
unusual.
were killed for being gay.
Yeah.
If you even hinted that you might be, somebody's going to beat you up.
Yep.
And chances are kill you. And people were killed.
In which we would both agree is wrong.
Absolutely. No, I
shouldn't
agree.
be killed for that.
No.
But the problem is...
But that was society saying this is bad.
Yeah. But then the next generation tolerated it, and today it's embraced.
It's I don't want to say required, but it's required that you embrace it.
Yeah.
It's required that you accept that lifestyle.
If you believe that it's wrong, we're going to just smear you over...
That's hate speech to say it's wrong.
It's hateful, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Which means what's going to happen with our next generation? How much further are we going to go? And this is where you end up with a place like this. Not saying that's where we are today. And I think this is where churches are going to have an issue, is because we have to rein it in somehow. But even... It can't be just like, well, they don't know who God is, so, damn them to hell. Because even Abraham was like, they don't even know you, but there could be some generous ones. Mm-hmm. Save the rest of them, because there's value in their life. How dare you even consider destroying them?
Yep.
Because some of them might still have a soul.
There's still hope.
Mm-hmm. So anyway.
Yeah, that's good.
You can continue, but it's just, we see this life... this through the light of good, bad, evil, not evil. We tend to hate them because, again, I don't even know where it comes from, but I keep hearing people say, we need to love what God loves and we need to hate what God hates. But even when God says, I'm going to destroy them, which would have been an act of love, because they're destroying generations. They're twisting and manipulating these people. Even Abraham's like, don't you dare.
Yep.
How dare you?
Yep. It's interesting you just said destroying them is an act of love.
Mm-hmm.
If God allows it to continue, the next generation is going to go even deeper.
Correct.
These are people who don't know God and are almost beyond the reach of the love of God. And I'd say that very carefully. If this continues on for another generation or 2 generations, or maybe it's already have gotten to this point, nobody's going to know God.
Yeah.
And the earth is going to be so corrupt and so evil that we are completely separated from God. The only act of love that God can do is to stop it.
Yeah.
And everyone knew when God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah and rained down hellfire and brimstone on the cities and destroyed the place, everyone on earth, the known earth, knew what happened and why.
Yeah.
That had to put a check. I don't care if you're a Canaanite that's still an evil place. You're thinking, whoa.
There's something here.
Whoa. Maybe we don't need to be having our parties because this is pretty bad.
Yeah.
We've just angered that God.
Yep. And they all worshipped a God.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody had seen that kind of power.
Yep.
So maybe we're worshiping a less powerful God.
Yep. And to this day, by the way, the location of Sodom and Gomorrah is all sulfur and...
Yep. And I remember there was a guy, and I want to look up who he was again, but he does archaeological finds based on biblical text, where he's proving the truth of the Bible with archaeology. So he's like, oh, well, it says it should be between this city and this city up on this hill by this river. I'm going to go there. I'm going to dig.
Yep.
And when he went to the place of Sodom and Gomorrah, he's like, these are just hills. There's nothing here. There's no remnants of a city. And then he realized all these hills are square. And all these hills are ash.
Yeah, yeah. And there's nothing there.
Yeah.
Nothing grows.
Yep.
Nobody lives there.
Yep. It's literally...
And this is...
When you realize these hills and mountains are just buildings that have been turned to pure ash.
Yep.
He's like, this is it.
That's 3,000 years of nothing.
And it wasn't meteors coming down and destroying, because they're still intact.
Uh-huh.
But they're pure sulfur and ash.
Just burned.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, anyway.
Yep.
I want to find out who that guy is again. But it's wild.
So in some of this, maybe we're alluding to like the story of Abraham or Lot leaving the city and all of that. Kind of assuming you know the story. If you don't know the story, it's an easy read. It's a simple thing to read. In the book of Genesis, or if you want to look up Jubilees, and we can put links to it in GentlemanOutlaw.com. But the idea is that so God brings judgment upon these cities because they were not feeding the poor or feeding the hungry. They were not clothing the naked, the people. They weren't taking in the people who needed shelter. That was probably the biggest thing, as people came into the city and they wouldn't take care of the sick. They wouldn't take care of the needy in any way at all. It was against the law. So then, shifting now 2,000 years, something like that, 1,500 years, to Jesus' time. Mm-hmm. And Jesus is talking to the people and said, I'm going to come and set up my kingdom, and I'm going to separate the sheep from the goats. And those of you that have fed the hungry, those of you that have clothed the naked, have taken in those who don't have shelter, those of you that have taken care of the sick and the needy and the poor amongst you, you're the righteous. Mm-hmm. You come into my kingdom for eternity because you've done this. And they said, well, when did we do that for you? And he says, whoever you did it just for the least of these, you've done it for me. And then he turns to the other people and said, there's those of you who did not take in the needy, those of you who did not clothe the naked or take in to shelter those who didn't have a shelter. There are those of you who did not feed the hungry. Those are those of you that did not take care of the poor in whatever way, the needy in whatever way. Those, because of those people, because of your sin, you are cursed and will spend eternity in hell.
And that would, I guess, be the contrast between the righteous and the self-righteous. Because righteous is making somebody else right.
Yep. And
the self-righteous is putting it on yourself and caring more about yourself.
Well, and we see in a different reference in the same book, and Jesus is talking, I believe it's chapter 7, where he is, same thing, he's going on in this long thing. And he says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. That's what we're talking about in chapter 25. Not all of you will enter the kingdom of heaven, but many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name? Sounds like church people.
Yep.
Have we not cast out demons in your name? There's the Pentecostals. Have we not done wonders in your name? And then I'll declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, those of you who work evil or work lawlessness, unrighteous. Why? Because they didn't take care of those who were in need.
Yeah.
They didn't clothe the naked and feed the hungry.
So it's, your salvation is not from your good deeds and the works that you've done in the name of God, but it's in the love that you've shown others.
Yes.
And how do you show others love? How do you grow closer to God? You show others how God has loved you.
Yep. Yeah.
And you don't just do that by telling them how to live a better life.
No. It says in the book of James, that what does it profit, my brother, if one says he has faith but does not have works? Can faith save him? There's a contentious thing because it does save us. But he says, basically his point is you're missing it. If a brother or sister is naked or destitute of food, and one of you says to them, depart in peace and be warmed and filled, but you do not give them the things which are needed for the body, what does that profit? You've done nothing. Mm-hmm. So you say you've got faith, and somebody comes to you and is in need of food or naked. The word there again, the word naked being they need a place to stay, and you say to them, "Depart in peace and be warmed, be filled."
Yeah.
I'll pray for you.
Yep.
I'll find somebody. I'll write you a check. I'll take care of that.
Or worse, how dare you even ask me?
Yeah, you foolish person.
Yeah. Inconsiderate, foolish person. I've got my own life to deal with.
Yep. He's saying your faith is dead. That's strong words.
Yeah.
That's strong words.
That is a self-righteous person who is right in line with Sodom and Gomorrah. They're not acting out the sexual immorality, hopefully, but their acts towards God are the same.
Yep. Yep. And we are seeing this everywhere. And I won't say that there's not exceptions. I there are godly people who are doing this all the time. There are godly people who will take in the people who, as the Bible calls them, naked, people who need a shelter. There are godly people who will feed the hungry. There are godly people who will sacrifice themselves and esteem others greater than themselves and take care of those around them. I've seen it. I've experienced it.
Yeah.
And it's been wonderful. But there are a lot of people I've run into recently, in the last adult life anyway, who say they're religious, who act religious, who are pastors or church leaders, and they think this whole concept is foolishness.
Yeah.
They really don't live it at all.
And what I find even more devastating is when you try to, if you want to say preach the gospel or bring Christ to people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what do I have to do? Nothing. You just have to love one another.
Right.
Well, I don't see that in the church, but I see that outside the church.
Yeah.
I see that by people, like, I already do that. Why do I need Christ? I already help my friends. I already am generous to people. I'm kind to people. But when I see the church, all I see is greed and judgment and rules.
Mm-hmm.
How do you argue that?
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
you're right. If I had to list off the most, in Abraham's words, the most righteous people that I know, if I had to find 10 of them, at least 5 of them are not inside of a church building or even proclaiming to be Christians.
We have a mutual friend up north that used to talk about he was a school teacher, and he knew another school teacher who was probably exhibited the fruits of the Spirit in ways that you rarely see. She was the kindest, most generous, most sweet, most loving, most caring. She would give everything she had to a person in need. She was just the picture of what God called us to do. Mm-hmm. She was an atheist.
Yeah.
And I remember him saying, I don't even know how to bring her to Christ.
Yeah.
Because why does she need God for it?
Yep. If Abraham was to be standing in front of, between you and God right now, and he says, show me 10 good men, would he point to you?
Right. Yeah, good point.
Because if he's not pointing to you, you're no better.
And so the question about love, and that's kind of where we're at here, is not a feeling. It's not a how I feel about you or good thoughts towards you. I'm sending good vibes towards you. That's not the love that God is talking about. These people who were separated when God separates the sheep from the goats, they're saying we were loving people. Mm-hmm. We did all these great things. We were casting out demons and we were prophesying. We were loving to the people around us. And God says, you didn't do what I asked you to do. When the hungry came, when the naked came,
yep,
you didn't take care of those people. You wrote a check. Yeah, you said be well.
We were preaching everything that was in here. We were telling everybody every word. We were putting it into context. We were talking about it. That's all you did was talk.
Yep.
When you saw somebody in need,
as in James,
you pushed them away.
Be well. You'll be fine. I'll pray for you.
Yep. Yep.
And when the need is still there, I remember a story of a lady who was a drunk, drinking heavily, and she actually wrote on Facebook. She said, I forget exactly how she said it, but basically, goodbye. I'm going to die. I'm going to drink myself to death because I've had enough. I can't do anymore. And there was a reply from someone within the church that said, "We'll come to church and we'll love you."
Yeah.
That's not love.
No.
She obviously never found love in the church, or she wouldn't have been in the shape she was.
Yeah. If I'm thinking of the right person, she was a constant attendee for a while.
She had been. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But she had stopped because she was drunk.
Yeah. There was no love there.
Right. I'm going to die. Well, come to church and we'll love you there. And I remember literally driving across this country from one side of this continent to the other. And Mom spent 2 weeks with this girl as she puked her guts out in bed. She didn't die.
Is she still?
She's still alive. And she's clean.
Is she?
Yep. Her life is very different from what it used to be.
So she must have got a meeting.
Yeah. A meeting with God. Yeah, I mean, I've seen this so many times. I know a lady with a family that we got to know very, very well, who had just gone through. I won't say it on video, but some horrible, horrific things with some family issues and the kind of stuff we're talking about here. There's some terrible things, and she couldn't bring herself to walk into the church doors. It was just. Sometimes you don't need that many people. Sometimes you just don't need that kind of condemnation.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you don't need that many people asking questions. You just need to be loved right where you're at. And we came with the pastor and some people's leaders of the church. Mom and I were on the road, but we came there, and she said, "Please just come to my home and love me where I'm at. That's all I ask.
Yeah.
I'll come to the church when I'm ready, but right now I'm just not ready for that. It's just not time. I've got to heal for a while.
I just can't go there.
I just can't go there." And weeks went by, months went by, and years went by, and she literally was from here to the other end of the barn from the church. I mean, she lived right there. You literally have to drive by her driveway to pull into the church parking lot. Not one person ever stopped in that house. Not one. That's not love, folks. That's not love. You can say, "Well, I'll pray for you." You can send $100 her way if you want. When Jesus talks about bearing one another's burdens, those burdens just became yours.
Yeah, it's no longer their problem. It's your problem.
It's your problem. It's your burden to carry.
And if they fail, it's your failure. Also, if they're victorious, it's your victory.
Yeah, that's right. And I've seen that. I've seen the victory many times. And I'm just so concerned that we've got this impression that love is something that we feel or good feelings, or I'll give you a book. Read this book, and it'll change the way you live. It'll help you through your addiction. It'll help you through your relationship issue, or you need to be in the Word.
Go check out other video.
That's not the answer.
Yeah.
They need somebody, what we always call, they need Jesus with skin on.
Yeah.
To just come alongside them and bear that burden with them. And we've just had this recently with a young girl that, as the Bible would say, was naked and needed to be clothed. In other words, needed a place to live. It wasn't offered by the people that she went to. And that breaks my heart. Because those who had the ability laughed it off, actually got angry because we suggested that maybe you could be the one to help because you've got abundance in this area.
Yeah.
And I was told I was insensitive and foolish
To even suggest it.
to even suggest that.
Yeah. With no explanation of we can't because.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Everybody's got a reason why they can't do something.
There's times it's just inappropriate or whatever the case may be. Say so.
Yeah.
Say, you know what? There's a better situation.
I'd really love to. However, due to these reasons, I can't. But I want to. I just can't.
Yep.
That's different.
Right.
And God makes accommodations for that, because even, Moses walking forward, he's like, I need you to go lead these people and speak to them. And he's like, I can't. I can't.
And God made arrangements.
And he made arrangements for that.
Yeah. So, yep. Immediately we opened our doors, but we're way out in the middle of nowhere out here, and it wasn't it wasn't a good situation.
And we also don't have the space, but we were going to make the accommodations.
We will make it happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was an option not taken, but it was an option.
Yeah. It wasn't laughed off.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of that around us. That doesn't mean we have to go looking for the homeless. We don't have to go looking for the poor. They will find us.
Yeah. God will put them in your place.
God will put them in your path.
And often it's a test from God saying, this is going to hurt. Do you trust me?
Yep, this might get expensive.
Yeah, this might pinch your pocketbook.
This might get inconvenient.
You might have to trust me to handle it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's our frustration and maybe some anger and just, I think too often pastors are preaching about love and they won't live it because they really don't understand it.
Yeah.
And James would say, you don't even have faith.
Yeah. It's empty.
It's empty. You think your faith will save you. And what James is saying is what you have isn't faith.
Yeah. It's a whitewashed tomb.
Yeah. Dead bones inside. Looks nice on the outside.
Yep.
It's nothing but dead bones inside. So our challenge is, if you call yourself a Christian, if you call yourself someone who is loved by God, then we have a responsibility. And responsibility is a funny word because it's not like if you feel like you're compelled to love somebody because you have to, because God said to, then maybe you don't know God at all. Because it should be a natural response.
Yeah.
Now, you may have to compel yourself to say, okay, I'm going to have to stretch myself here, and I really don't want to.
Yep.
But the desire should already be there.
Yeah. I want to help. I just don't know how because I don't have the financial means to help. However, I'm going to put the offer on the table, and I pray to God He's going to put somebody else in their way. Cause,
Yeah.
But
sometimes
the offer's there, and if it comes, it's His problem.
Yeah.
He's going to have to make these ends meet because I don't know how I'm going to.
Right. Right.
But
So what does a person do if they're attached to a institutional facility and the leadership of that church or the pastor is like in the book of James where they say, go and be well,
yeah,
but refuses to help or refuses to acknowledge the need even?
yeah, I don't know how to handle that. Because instinct is just wipe the dust off your feet and walk out. My first instinct is to run them out of town. I don't know if that's a godly thing.
Well, and so the question comes in my mind, the first thing when you say that is, are they hurting people by not teaching people how to love one another?
Yeah.
We were told by Jesus a couple of little things. I mean, He's giving all these examples and He lived it.
Yeah.
But then He said to love one another.
Love God first.
Bear one another's burdens. Love God. Love each other. And go and make disciples.
Yeah.
That's it. That's what we're commanded to do. That's our orders.
Yep. And when you have
There's nothing else.
when you have a church organization that's not teaching who God is, how can you love Him?
Mm-hmm.
When they're not living out loving each other, how do you know how to do it? Because otherwise you're going to end up just like the folks in Sodom and Gomorrah, where after generation after generation after generation, it's no longer even a thought because you haven't been raised that way. You don't know how to do it. You haven't experienced righteousness.
Right.
And how do you make disciples? Disciples of what? Because
Right.
you're not loving God. You're not loving your neighbor. If you're going to make a disciple, it's going to be not loving God, not loving a neighbor.
Yep. Yep.
So we were given in order. First, we need to know who God is, and we need to know how to love Him. Well, how to love Him is loving your neighbor.
Yeah. That's it.
How do you love your neighbor? Well, you make disciples by teaching them who God is and how to love Him, which is loving the neighbor.
It's just all one thing.
It's
isn't it?
one thing.
Yep. Yep. Exactly right. And how many times I don't know. Have you ever seen a church or a pastor or a congregation who embraces discipleship, other than a class on Tuesday nights you come to and we teach you about the Bible?
We're going to read our Bible a bunch because that's discipleship.
And that's, sorry folks, that's BS.
Yeah.
That is not discipleship.
It's important.
It's great to do. That's fantastic. But discipleship means that the person that you are discipling learns to live just like you live. Because, of course, you live a godly life. You live a righteous, using that word, righteous life, where you're generous with other people. You take care of the hungry. You feed the homeless. Take care of the homeless. You feed the hungry. You know, all of those things. That's the way you live.
Yeah.
And you are walking that out in your daily life, and you take this other person into your home, or you take this young person into your home, or into your circles of influence, and you spend time with them, and you walk with them, and you live with them, and they get to see how you, in a realistic, actual way, live out the Christian life in love.
Yeah.
That's discipleship.
Yep.
And if you say to somebody, here, go live over there, here's some food, or here's some money and to help you pay your rent, you're not discipling that person.
No, you're enabling.
You're enabling them. You're not doing a bit of good.
Yep.
That's not what God called us to do. That's not what he asked.
Yep.
And occasionally, he will put somebody in our path.
In our way to see.
And those are the people that we're called to love. Again, we don't have to go walking down the street looking for them. He will put them in our path.
Yep.
And sooner or later, somebody's going to make a Facebook post and say, I've lost my home, or I don't have food for groceries,
Yep. And if
or money for groceries.
if you see that and think, well, it's their own fault because they're just not adulting properly,
Sure.
and so they quit their job and they lost their home, and it's their fault.
Yep.
Well, yeah, that might be true,
I
but
think every problem I've got is my fault.
yeah, they've never had anybody disciple them on how to do their finances
Right.
and how to adult.
Mm-hmm.
That's rule number 3. Teach them,
Yes.
disciple them.
It is our responsibility.
Yeah, you can't just be like, their problem, their fault, not my issue.
Yep.
You take their burdens on. If they're not living right and they want to be part of the church and they want to know who God is, that's your problem. Your burden to bear.
Yep. That's right. And I'm not saying this from a point of
Judgment.
this is my idea, I think you should do it. This has been our lifestyle for
Yeah,
as long as I can remember.
I grew up with you guys doing this in our homes thinking it was normal. I mean,
I thought it was normal. Go figure. The surprise when people don't do this.
yeah, it's like we have people living in our home. Who are they? I don't know. You don't know who's living in your home?
Right.
Well, I know their names.
Uh-huh.
But they're just, this lady we met on the lake one day.
Right.
I don't know who she is.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. This family that used to live down the road, I guess we just all got along really well because now they're living with us.
Right.
I didn't know.
Yep. Yep.
My grandpa's living with me right now for some reason.
Crystal was out babysitting one time and brought home a whole family that we had never
Yeah.
met.
Yeah.
They moved in.
They spent a whole summer with us.
Uh-huh. So, and we're not even talking church people.
No.
God didn't call us just to love church people.
No. Very few church people came into our home.
Yeah, actually, it was the other way around.
It was mostly random people that just needed help.
And like I said, we never thought of it any other way. Like I said earlier, going and contacting other churches and because we needed a place to stay and just assuming that's what people do.
Yeah.
Silly me.
Yeah.
Some do. Some say we don't do that here.
Yeah. Some get it. Most don't get it.
No.
And I don't know how to find that because apparently it's not normal.
It's not anymore in our society.
It's supposed to be. Anybody who proclaims to be a Christian, that should be normal.
So we do this video, and I'm thinking to myself, the book of Hebrews tells us to spur one another on to love and good works. Spurring is kicking you in the ribs.
Yeah.
And hopefully if you're seeing this video, this is a bit of a kick in the ribs, and you either are agreeing already, or you're saying, I guess I probably haven't been observant of those in need as I should be, or you think we're fools. In that case, I'm worried for you.
Yeah.
Because James would say that you're just like a demon. You acknowledge that there's a God, but you're not following him. He's very specific about who the sheep and the goats are. Those who are cursed into everlasting fire, and those who are in the kingdom of God.
And there's really zero reason to get angry at us for this video. If you hear this and it hits you and you get mad, that means it's not us pointing fingers. We haven't said names. We haven't given specific situations. If it hits you, that might be God poking you, saying, you failed. The nice thing is we have a God of grace, and he gives us these tests.
Yep.
And if we fail the test, he gives us another one to redeem ourselves.
It'll come back around.
If
you're God's person.
If you're God's person. Now, if you just close your ears and shut your eyes and stiffen your neck,
that's where you die.
That's not on us. And again, we would love to walk with people through this.
Yep.
This is the only way we know how to get this message out, and hopefully it reaches the right people. But I think this is the best way we know how to do this.
Gives us a chance to unpack our thoughts.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And we're not attacking anybody. We're not pointing fingers. This is for everybody out there in cyber world. So.
Well, folks, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, we appreciate your time. This is probably another hour-long video. This seems to be our time. If you like this and this kind of content, you can go to our website at gentlemanoutlaw.com and see more videos and references to things that we talk about in here. If you have any questions, either comment below, or again in that website there's a place where you can comment. It comes directly to us in case you don't want the whole public to see it. Mm-hmm. We would really enjoy any feedback on these, whether good, bad, or indifferent.
That's right.
Because we're just two guys talking. Also, side note, we would really like to go through, and this is probably for people more local, but we would really like to go through the whole Bible, cover to cover, this whole thing right here, starting with Genesis 1:1, going all the way through it, and study it. I guess we want
break it down.
At least one more person,
mm-hmm.
But we would like to get together at least once a week and do it on video so more people can see and engage. And if you miss a week, you can just catch back up on the week that you missed.
Yep.
Ideally, somebody with possibly a not perfectly aligning point of view. And we take an hour, 2 hours, ideally an hour and a half to 2 hours, and we read a chapter, and then we go back and we discuss that chapter together, whatever we find important, and we break it down to a level that makes sense.
Yeah.
And once that chapter is exhausted to the point of satisfaction, we move on to chapter 2. And so we might go through one chapter in 3 weeks, and we might go through 5 chapters in 1 week.
Right.
But we want somebody to go with us. If being a part of that interests you, again, go to the link at gentlemanoutlaw.com and reach out to us.
Yeah.
If listening to something that interests you, just put a like on this video or a comment, or again, you can go to gentlemanoutlaw.com and contact us directly, because we're interested in that. We assume somebody needs to be interested in that.
Yeah. I think it'd be fun. I think that would just round table discussion and just work our way through it.
Yeah.
Genesis 1 might take us, like you say, 3-4 weeks. You get to Leviticus, we might do half the book in one setting. Because there's some stuff that are like, whoa, okay, let's move on.
Yeah, let's just skip over that, because that doesn't make any sense.
But we'll plow through it the best we can, and hopefully we'll come out more knowledgeable. But we'll get to know who God is, because He reveals Himself in the Scriptures, and that's one way He tells us who He is.
Yeah, and we would like to know Him better, because that's kind of what we're supposed to do. So, again, thank you for your time. We appreciate you being here and hope we didn't bore you to death. Thank you.